Shadow of War has quite a few extensive skill trees that allow you to modify them to suit your own playstyle. These skill upgrades for each individual skill allow for unparalleled customization and versatility, making it one of the few single player games that uses this feature to great effect. So in this guide, I will be detailing all of these skills as well as the best skill upgrades for general use. This is, of course, my own opinion, and the games balance these skills in a way that makes them all viable and effective without compromising gameplay. But before all that, you should do yourself a favor and subscribe. YouTube tells me that only 1% of you are actually subscribed, so it'll help you easily find future guides or videos I make, and would help the channel out immensely, since I'm trying to grow the channel to 100 subscribers by the end of the year. Now with all that out of the way, let's talk skills. I will take the 3 most useful skills and the skill upgrades I use for each of them. So without further ado, let's get into it. The most used skill tree in the entire game is the combat skill tree. This is what allows you to slaughter thousands of orcs, captains, war chiefs, and overlords. I recommend unlocking this entire skill tree first, since it's that essential for your domination of Mordor. The combat skill tree, I suggest unlocking Execution, which will allow you to instantly kill enemies during combat once you fill up your hit streak. And there's 3 upgrades for this. You can have the Grim Resolve upgrade, which lets you gain might during combat every time you get damaged, basically. Secret Might, which will get you might for every stealth kill or stealth hit that you perform without being detected. And there is also Fatal Might, which means that you will deal more might damage, so every hit will generate far more might than before, but your might fully resets when you take damage, miss an attack, or finish combat. The second skill I would suggest for the combat skill tree would be the Perfect Counter. Perfect Counter allows you to instantly knock down enemies with a well-timed counter, and these upgrades are Rain of Arrows, which will give you 1 arrow per perfect counter, Mighty Reversal, which will allow you to gain might for every perfect counter that you perform, or my personal favorite, Fatal Counter, that will instantly kill enemy grunts during a perfect counter. This is great if you find yourself being too overwhelmed or dying far too easily, getting knocked down to grunt orcs. This will let you have some breathing room, as whenever one tries to attack you, you'll kill them instantly. The final upgrade or skill I suggest for the combat skill tree is definitely the Brutal Aggression. Brutal Aggression will allow you to have 2 might bars instead of 1, and the upgrades that I like to use is Ceaseless Might. This allows you to use an execution or a special move with only 1 bar. As with double charged might, it'll usually consume 2. Of course, you can also use the Wraith execution with this. That will allow you to kill multiple enemies as long as you have enough focus during a single execution. The Predator tree is your gateway into stealth and intimidation throughout the game. It will allow you to chain kill enemies and use death threats as well as poisons to murder Sauron's forces. Moving on to the Predator skill tree, we will have the Brutalize skill, which will allow you to brutally perform stealth attacks. This will terrify nearby enemies and increase your might and hit streak at the same time. So for this, I like to use Unyielding Ferocity, as it'll provide a lot more might and double your hit streak without sacrificing too much. And obviously, since this can be used to terrify orcs, terrified orcs can be stealth attacked again. So you can just have a chain of brutalized attacks that will fill up your might very fast, as well as increase your hit streak to enormous amounts. Although, as an alternative to this, you can use Reckless Hate. This will not grant any bonuses, but will cause more enemies to flee. Without this, it would only be 2. With this, it can be increased from anywhere to 4 or 6 enemies per brutalize. Then of course we have the poison tendril. This will allow you to poison grog barrels from afar by using the distract key. For this you have bursting toxin, where grunts who drink it will become poison explosives basically. Contagion, which means that enemies that drink from the poison grog will start attacking each other and will spread the poison. Or the one I use, proximity trigger, since it can be used to trigger traps or set traps basically. Whenever an orc is nearby and you use the proximity trigger on a baitable item or a cage, this will allow it to burst open when the orc is within range. Finally, for the predator skill tree, I have the Wraith chain as another very useful skill. It will allow you to chain stealth kills, normal stealth kills of course, while you have focus. This can lead up to killing 5 or 6 enemies at one time. Of course you can upgrade it so that you can use stealth attacks on animals or monsters, but I find that very difficult to use since you won't be facing most beasts and stuff anyway. I do of course use Shadow Blade, which makes the free first stealth attack. So when I stealth attack somebody and I chain it, that first chain kill will not consume any focus, allowing me to kill at least 1 or 2 more enemies per chain. Distance is something that you should use to your advantage regularly. The ranged skill tree lets you enhance all your range attacks to deal the most damage to your enemies, and can even unlock a sort of teleportation to move around the battlefield with the talent strike. For the ranged tree, I like to personally make the most use out of the freeze pin ability, which will allow you to pretty much stun enemies in place by pinning their feet. You have to shoot them in the feet for this, and if they are immune to range, they will not be pinned. However, it is very useful against other types of enemies that have the ability to be pinned, and will pretty much just keep them locked out of combat for a few seconds. The upgrades for this are Brutal Cold, which will make nearby enemies flee in terror upon seeing somebody get pinned. This is not very useful for me, at least, since I like to maximize my focus gain and wrath gain, so making enemies flee unless I'm going to chase after them for a brutalized kill is not very worthwhile. Then there's Savage Ice, which allows you to pin Ologs. I did test this, and for Olog captains you also need to have the upgrade equipped. You cannot pin Olog captains unless you have this skill upgrade, so it's the one I use. Then there's Deep Freeze, which doubles the duration of the pin. I was using this before I switched to Savage Ice, and it is very useful if you'd like to keep an enemy down longer than usual. Say you're fighting a captain and you would like to take a breather while you deal with his grunts. This is a great way to do that. Next up is the Bird of Prey. Bird of Prey allows you to basically lose less focus while in the air, although I believe the main skill allows you to shoot arrows while in the air. The upgrade Eagle Sight consumes focus at a slower rate, so I kind of switched those up. But I like to use the Talon Strike, since you can pretty much teleport around the map whenever you use it. It just puts you in the center of your cursor while releasing a damaging blast that will stun or even kill nearby enemies, and it consumes 1 arrow per use. But its range is very far, so you can use it to quickly traverse throughout the map. Finally, for the ranged skill tree, we have the Shadow Strike. The Shadow Strike allows you to instantly teleport to an enemy and kill or stun them, depending on which button you press. You of course have the Chain of Shadows, which will allow you to chain these, much like the stealth kills, which will consume focus. This is great for disbanding high amounts of orcs or moving through a camp while eliminating orcs in a quick and efficient manner. Then you have the Shadow Strike Pull. Like the name says, it'll pretty much bring the orc you're targeting to you. And then you have the Shadow Dominate, which will add the additional prompt to dominate orcs upon a Shadow Strike. This means you can teleport to an orc and dominate them, and it seems the most useful to me when broken captains are fleeing or when you are far away from them. If you ever wanted to use magic to freeze, dominate, and throw spectral daggers at orcs, then the Wraith skill trees are the perfect fit for you. Using the power of your Wraith, you'll be able to use some pretty cool elemental attacks, as well as being able to completely freeze your enemies. The Wraith skill tree allows you to use the power of your Wraith, of course, and some very good skills for this, starting with Elven Light. Elven Light allows you to unleash the blast when your might is full. That will pretty much stun or kill nearby enemies, as well as blinding them. Blind them is basically stun them for a short duration. This can be upgraded to use elemental attacks, such as Fire with Cleansing Blaze, Winter's Breath, which will freeze enemies caught up in the blast, or Poison Blast, which will poison all enemies. This is the one I use since most enemies that are defenders will block the fire and the ice attacks. But poison being, I guess, a gas in the game's own terms, goes right through them and affects every enemy no matter what. Then of course we have Ice Storm, which allows you to freeze an enemy in place, setting them up for a flurry of attacks that lead to a finisher. For this you have the Shower of Ice, which will make the freeze attack have a radius in front of you. Everything caught in this radius will be frozen and is affected by your hit streaks. So the higher your hit streak, the bigger the size of this radius. Then you have Frostbite. That means when finishers are done, it causes a critical strike. This is an added bonus to your hit streak. But besides that, it just deals more damage. I don't find it very useful since I prefer to, well, I can't really see the use for me in critical strikes. Of course, it is still very viable and useful if you're going for a critical build. I know some gear sets use critical strikes quite often to set enemies on fire, curse them, make them explode. So this can be very useful if you're using one of those sets. Then of course we have Shattering Blow, which is the one I use. It causes enemies to shatter upon a finisher, and this terrifies nearby enemies. This is good for when you're fighting an overlord, for example. You have a lot of enemies ganging up on you. You can eliminate an enemy, causing the others to flee the scene. They'll still be around since they can't leave the fight, but they'll be in the corners of the room and will easily be targets for brutalized kills, granting you more might, which will in turn make the overlord a lot easier to kill. Finally, for the Wraith skill tree, I like to use Consume, which will pretty much instantly dominate orcs during combat. It can also work on broken captains. For this, I like to use the Chain of Souls, where I chain dominate orcs. Of course, you need to have the Dominate skill active in order to dominate them. As you can see here, their heads are just exploding. But if you were to have the Arrow or the Wrath skill upgrade for the Dominate skill, you would pretty much just gain those. This is good for turning the tides of a fight, so if you're outnumbered, you can just easily dominate most of the orcs with a chain and will pretty much just win the fight. This also works on broken captains, so you do not need to get anywhere near them if you don't have to. Then we have Lord of Wrath, which increases your Wrath bar every time you dominate an orc. This can be very useful if you're going for a Wrath build, but other than that, I'd rather just kill the orcs.
Then we have Olog Lord, which allows Consume to work against Ologs. This is not a requirement if you want to consume a captain that is an Olog, so keep that in mind. And overall, I just prefer the Chain of Souls as it allows you to get more followers than just one very strong one. I really like to play this as a numbers game rather than a quality game.
Mounted skill tree will allow you to become the Lord of the Hunt, taming the beasts of Mordor to wreak havoc among Sauron's armies. Everything from leading packs of Caragors to raining fire from the skies with one of Mordor's many drakes. This is definitely a skill tree you do not want to overlook.
As far as the mounted skill tree goes, I like to use the Call Mount skill, which when upgraded can be used to summon a dire Caragor, a stronger version of the standard Caragor, a Graug, which will allow you to summon a big old hulking Graug. This can be used easily in fortress assaults to destroy defenses such as siege beasts, doors, or walls. And not to mention the Graug is pretty much the biggest type of enemy in the game, making it very useful when you're sieging. And this added with the War Graug Siege upgrade will allow you to have up to 2 Graugs at the same time. The same can be said about everything else here. If you have a beast upgrade during a siege, you can just summon another one, so on and so forth. But then you have the Dragon Song when you complete the Karnan questline, which will allow you to summon a Drake. This is by far the best way to get around the map and deals a lot of fire damage. It is the only thing that you can spawn that can deal elemental damage, since elemental Graugs need to be found throughout the world or need a specific gear set, which I believe is the Feral gear set. Then of course I like to have the Shadow Mount, as it can pretty much allow you to dominate beasts from range. So as you can see there, once you break the beast, you can simply aim at it with your bow and dominate it. That will instantly take you to it, of course, and will allow you to just ride it instantly. This is great for drakes, and it's pretty much one of the only ways you can dominate drakes, as they are very difficult to dominate when they land. You can of course upgrade it so that you can instantly dominate Caragors without having to break them. This can be good if you like to use Caragors a lot, and once you get to the higher tiers of the game, they will be very easy to kill. So it's great if you want to dominate Caragors. I like to use the Pack Master, since it'll tame every other Caragor in a radius, and I can easily manage to not kill the Caragor and just break it. This will grant you quite a few new beasts added, and they will be friendly for the entire duration unless they are retamed by an enemy beastmaster. Finally, I like to have the Dragon Rider. Obviously I can use it to ride the drakes, but it also has 2 skill upgrades which I believe are very valuable. First is Skills of Iron, which I like to use since it allows your Drake to take far less damage from every other type of attack. Obviously it can still be one shot by a Beast Slayer Orc, but it's still very good if you want to use Drakes a lot and you want to stay in the air as long as possible. Then of course you have Soaring Rage, which will allow the Drake to shoot fireballs at the cost of its health. Obviously this is a bit counterintuitive for me since I want to last as long as possible, but it can still be used if you're planning to just quickly use a Drake for a lot of damage and then just leave it for something else.
To use the power of the new ring, you'll want to get some of the skills from the story skill tree. You'll get these skills as you progress through the game in the first and second act, so the base skills should be unlocked fairly quickly. This also includes Elven Range, which makes you the Middle-earth version of, and also unlocks the ability to recruit captains as followers and build your own army.
So finally, we now have the story skill tree. This will pretty much grant you the abilities of the ring. And first we have drain. It'll allow you to drain enemies of their health, and with the domination skill upgrade, you will be able to dominate every orc you drain. I believe that orcs that you drain that become dominated will not lose health, or will regain their health upon the first domination, so it's very useful if you want to turn the tides of battle by draining orcs. Then again, you have the Quiver of Souls, which will allow you to get arrows per drain kill. Drain kills will still deal damage and will not dominate orcs. And of course there is Wrath. That means that you will fully recover your health and you will gain Wrath. I personally would avoid this since there are some rings that you can use that will increase your health to max health without needing the skill upgrade, and Wrath is something that you can gain quite easily during most fights since, like I said in a later video, it is very much a group fight heavy game, so you'll be taking on large groups without much help, so you'll be able to gain Wrath pretty easily. I of course use the domination since it extends to regular stealth as well. That will pretty much allow me to quietly dominate forces like archers and then turn them all against the enemy orcs. Then of course you have Elven Rage, unlocked during the Minas Ethel questline in the first few hours of the game. I believe it is the second or third mission that grants you this, and it basically allows you to kill as many orcs as possible without so much as a thought. You can shoot arrows, you can instantly execute, you can strike, kind of like a shadow strike but without the bow, and it'll refill your might bar pretty much all the time. It'll constantly allow it to fill, and any executions you use will not use up the might bar. Of course, just like Elven Light mentioned earlier, this uses elemental attacks, such as Final Blaze, that when the rage ends, your enemies will be caught in a big ball of fire. Freezing Burst, which is what I use, that way I can vary my entire style. So I have a fire attack with the exploding arrows, a poison attack with the Elven Light, and a freezing burst with the Elven Rage. This will just freeze everybody once you're done, and it's very good if you want to isolate somebody after the rage itself. Then you have Poisoner's Wrath, which will of course poison everybody once your Elven Rage has ended. Very useful for stunning or animation locking some of the orcs. And finally, we have the Dominate Captain skill, which is essential to building your army. The upgrades for this are Destroy Followers, which will allow you to explode the heads of any nearby followers, causing others to flee or just instantly kill them. This is great if you want to get a orc's legendary gear without having to fight them. It's very easy, and there's a minimal chance they'll come back from the dead as you're just blowing their head off. Then there's Lifeblood, which will allow you to heal followers during combat at the expense of your own health. And this, coupled with a ring that restores your full health during one single drain, are very good ways to fully heal your orcs and keep them alive. Of course, if they're bleeding out on the ground, you will need to revive them first. And then there's the Enraged Followers. This will pretty much make all orcs in the radius enraged. Great for fortress sieges, or well, more of a hindrance, since they will pretty much attack everybody indiscriminately.
And with that, you now know every detail of the skill trees in Shadow of War. These skills should pretty much make you the strongest general in Mordor. Not to mention, you'll be able to easily wipe fortresses and invading armies off the map. If you enjoyed this video, you should subscribe, like, and comment ideas for more guides and tips on not just Shadow of War, but quite a few other games as well. We're coming up on 50 subscribers soon, and I would love to have 100 subscribers by the end of the year. But that's about it. Bye, and have a good one.